Forbes Books presents The Sky's the Limit with host Dee Brown, the president and CEO of the P3 Group, the nation's largest minority public-private partnership real estate developer. Here's Dee.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of The Sky's the Limit. I'm your host, Dee Brown. Today, I'm going to mix it up a little bit, and I'm going to be interviewed by my producer, Joe Pardivila. So now, I'm going to turn the show over to Joe.
Hola, it's Joe Pardivila, and thanks for joining me for another episode of the Forbes Books podcast. And COVID has been brutal, but what are the long-term effects of the pandemic on the real estate market? In the short term, we've seen residential go boom and commercial go bust. And how will COVID change the way developers build and scale their business? My guest today might have some answers. His name is Dee Brown, and he's the president and CEO of the P3 Group, the nation's largest minority-owned real estate developer that focuses exclusively on public-private partnerships. Dee has nearly 30 years of experience in real estate sales, development, and management. And his next challenge will be to host a new podcast titled The Sky's the Limit. Dee, welcome.
Hey, how you doing, Joe?
I'm doing good. And, I guess I want to start by this. Why real estate? Because it seems like a tough way to make a living. What inspired you to get into it?
Joe, I first gained interest in real estate when I was about 19 years old, hanging around an uncle that was trying to do some affordable housing developments. That led to me getting my real estate license. And of course, I was a salesperson. At that time, went on to start my own real estate and investment firm. After the recession in '08, I transitioned from being kind of a traditional, real estate developer to being a general contractor that was doing heavy civil concrete. After I started working for various government agencies, I stumbled across some opportunities to do some public-private partnerships with a number of federal agencies, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in several districts, Department of Interior, and ultimately the U.S. Navy's nuclear facility in Goose Creek, South Carolina. And so after I started doing these P3s with the federal government, it kind of led me back home to my first love, which was real estate. And I kind of merged my construction and development experience with my knowledge of doing public-private partnerships. And we began to deliver these projects for government agencies around the country. And so I don't think it's a very difficult way to make a living, in my opinion, because there's a significant need for infrastructure improvements, facility improvements in government agencies around the country. Our primary focus is smaller communities, but we do service communities of all, sizes. But the services that we render, the design, build, finance solution is one that we see that government agencies need, because a lot of them do not have the technical resources to do these type of projects in-house. And when they attempt to do them in-house, they tend to come in over budget. The quality of work tend to be inferior. And so we feel that we offer a superior delivery method that allow projects to be delivered quickly for government agencies.
But let's step back. Again, why real estate? I mean, you mentioned your uncle. What is it about? Because that's the one thing I'm really nosy about, because I see a lot of people in it. There's real estate companies that come in every shape, form, or size. But what does it do for you? Like, what does it do to your spirit, like your being? Why do you love it so much?
I love what I do because we're doing not just your typical real estate transactions. We are actually impacting communities. We're impacting the quality of life for individuals in those communities. And so the projects that we're delivering through our P3 model bring about a sense of pride, bring about legacy building, not just for us or myself as a company, but also for the elected officials and administrations that are, shepherding these projects forward. So these are game changers. For example, we are constructing a health unit in Jefferson County, Arkansas. Now, the existing facility has mold, mildew. It's raining in the building. Workers have gotten sick from occupying that building. So this facility is a game changer. They not only provide safe and sanitary working condition for the employees, they're also providing good quality health care for the citizens of that community. So when we deliver public safety, fire, police, healthcare facilities to these communities, These are vital programs that the citizens need to be safe and secure and healthy within their communities.
And, one of the things you mentioned and that you excelled in was government contracting. And to a lot of people, they see this government contracting as this giant monolith. But I've spoken to a lot of people that are involved in it, and it really is, as big as it sounds, it's all about personal connections, right? When it comes down, because at the end of the day, it's just one human being signing off on this one thing. It's not like you have to go to Congress or pass a law through the Senate. It's really these people connections in the world of government contracting, isn't it?
Well, in the world that we operate in, it's all about relationships, obviously, and it's about reputation. Typically, you're going to have, a city council or board of supervisors or some governing authority for that agency that's signing off on the project. So, but it's about relationships, obviously, but it's also about, credibility, past performance, and them feeling that you can actually provide the solutions that they're looking for.
And can you break this down for me? Because the P3 group stands for Public-Private Partnerships. In the simplest forms, because I know you're a real estate expert, so I am not. What does that mean, a public-private partnership?
So a public-private partnership is essentially an agreement between a private company and some unit of the government, whether it's municipal, county, federal, state, universities, colleges, etc. And that agreement typically transfer certain risks associated with delivering these projects to the private sector. And they oftentimes result in a quicker, more robust delivery for the public sector. And the public sector get to transfer risk such as pre-construction risk, construction risk, execution risk. They get to transfer that risk to the private sector.
And, I'd love to get your opinion on this. The pandemic, you hear this term long haulers, people that are still enduring the effects of COVID. And I feel just by reading up on what's happening in the real estate industry that commercial real estate are going to be long haulers in this, because the effects that the pandemic has had on real estate, and especially when it comes to commercial properties, it seems like it's going to be an uphill climb there. So talk to me about the now hopefully post-pandemic effect on commercial real estate.
I believe that the commercial real estate industry is obviously going to have a significant adverse impact from the COVID-19 pandemic. I think on multiple fronts. Obviously, a number of large and small retailers have gone out of business because sales have been down, revenues have been down. But also, I think that a lot of companies figured out during the pandemic that they don't need as much, office space, and that they can get productivity from their employees working remotely. And so what I believe is that you'll start seeing offices downsize. There'll probably be, a significant amount of inventory on the market that was vacated during the pandemic. Of course, the sector, that we operate in is a little bit different, because we are providing essential public facilities and infrastructure to the government. And so the needs of the citizens of each community don't change because there's a pandemic. And what we have been doing as a company on projects that we're developing, we are actually integrating responses to this pandemic within our designs. For instance, projects that we construct now have negative air pressure, which prevent the airborne transmission of infectious diseases.
Wait, hold on a second. That sounds pretty impressive. How the heck do you do that?
Well, there's a technology out called negative pressure that essentially prevents the transmission of infectious diseases through the ventilation systems.
Wow.
So it's a clean air technology that exists, and we're incorporating those into our designs.
Is that like a huge spend, or how much does that add to budgets of these future projects? Because it sounds like something that people will want to have, whether it's a pre-existing building or a new building, right? What kind of expense are we talking about?
Obviously it would vary depending on the size of the facility that you're, installing it. Mm-hmm. But I would imagine it would add maybe about 20%, 25% to the cost of your mechanical system.
Wow. And again, in the long run, it's sort of like the short-term pain of paying that, but the long-term can be quite profound, because you're seeing, and I'm not sure it's the same technology that the airplanes use, but you've noticed that once the airline industry picked up, after that pandemic stoppage, You haven't heard about outbreaks on planes and stuff like that. And it just goes to show you how important these kind of negative spaces that you're talking about are going to be going forward.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And there are other things we're doing. I mean, we're building facilities that have COVID-19 testing, drive-through testing facilities integrated into the design. We are constructing a coroner's office that has a decontamination unit that allows for the coroner and the deputy coroners to decontaminate after coming in contact with a deceased individual that may have an infectious disease, and before they go into the administrative area of the facilities. And we have the administrative areas and the morgue and those areas separated. And again, negative air pressure is being utilized. Washable walls and floors within the morgue that would allow for easy cleaning and decontamination of those areas as well. So there are a lot of things and a lot of lessons learned from this pandemic. And so I think at least from our perspective as a P3 developer, we are incorporating those lessons learned into our designs going forward.
How much of this is new to you in terms of, the negative air pressure and the health ramifications? Was this something that was on top of mind or even part of the bottom line when you were doing stuff pre-March of 2020, or was this all new for you?
No, these are actually lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic. Prior to that, honestly, we weren't thinking about negative air pressure in facilities because we weren't really thinking about, airborne infectious diseases, right? And so COVID-19, because of how easily it was transmitted, through the air, made us sit back and think about, hey, how do we respond to these type of situations now within the design of facilities that we're delivering? I mean, making sure that, adequate spacing is available for people to have workstations that are sufficiently distanced from each other and those sorts of things. We just did not think about it before COVID-19.
How crazy is this that you're in this world now where it's almost like, you use the phrase game changer, like your game has changed completely. Whereas I'm sure back in the day, it was just like build buildings, make them safe, make them easy, make them so that everyone has access to them. But now how bizarre is it for you?
Oh, it's very bizarre because, it's changed the way that we approach each project. So every project that we look at now, we have to think about what if, right? What if there's another pandemic? What can this facility be used for? We're designing a health and wellness facility, for example, that is, has basketball court, indoor track, etc. However, it can be converted into an emergency hospital and actually have patients served there in the event of another pandemic and there's a significant need for additional hospital beds. And so those are the sort of things that we just did not think about before March of 2020.
And so what do you see? We talked about these commercial real estate properties and I live in the suburbs now and I see these large scale like business parks. Do you see those being, dinosaurs? Like the idea of a business park that has like, several hundred offices and, a lot of lease space. I mean, I know that's not your bag right now, but do you see a lot of those commercial real estate properties being like, what do we do now with these kind of entities?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a significant impact on these large scale commercial developments, both on the office and retail side. I think that you're going to see a diminished demand for large commercial spaces as well as large retail spaces, because what is happening is people are getting it done, right, without all of the excess space. Mm-hmm. So now you have to reevaluate, right? When you go into a market, do I open a full office or do I allow my people to work remotely? And I think what COVID-19 did, it proved that people can work remotely and be productive. It proved that people can shop and buy goods online without having to go into a retail location. And so I think that you're going to see diminished demand for those areas.
Does it scare you in terms of, we never saw this coming, and in a world where you're building buildings and communities for people, like, do you think to yourself like, man, I don't know if I'll be prepared for the next thing? Or is it one of those things where maybe just because you've been doing this for a long, it's like you just roll with the punches, you have to evolve or die?
I think you have to evolve or die. I mean, with everything that happens, there's always opportunity, whether it's something positive or something negative. there's always an opportunity, right, for innovative companies to thrive in that space. And so what we have seen, at least through this pandemic, cities still recognize that we have to provide essential services to our citizens.
Hmm.
And so our job has been to understand that there's still a need for these services, but how do we deliver these services, taking into account all of the needs and requirements that need to be integrated into these designs to address what we've learned through this pandemic. So no, it doesn't concern me. I see opportunity in all of this.
And, one of the things we noticed with the pandemic, and you talked about the ability for businesses to have their employees work from home, is the fact that cities like New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, they don't have to have the monopoly on talent anymore, because now you can live in Arkansas but work for a Silicon Valley tech company. So
Right.
how do you think that's going to change the real estate world in terms of these smaller communities that aren't used to having all these people? Do you see something like, I know WeWork did not work out well, but do you see more of like a WeWork style format for companies that, they can have places they can go that aren't just in New York or LA?
Oh, absolutely. And this was actually going on prior to the pandemic, but I think since the pandemic and people were forced to work remotely, I think that all of these are going to be the type of options that companies are going to consider going forward, because it saves significantly on cost. And I think that a lot of companies realize that, we are getting it done, whether we're at home or in the office. We're getting it done, and we're still making things happen for our businesses. And I think ultimately the commercial market is going to suffer because of that.
Let's talk about a couple of things that P3 does. There's two delivery methods that I'm aware of. It's design, build, finance, and design, build, finance, operate, maintain. And they have acronyms for that, DBF and DBFOM. So can you
Right.
break those down for me?
So most of our projects are delivered under the design, build, finance model. And essentially what that means is that we don't require our public partners, the municipality, the county government, university or college, to pay any money up front for the project. We design the project with their input and with their specifications in mind. We provide the capital for the project, and then we deliver the completed project for them. But they take possession of the project, they operate it, maintain it, and they make annual payments for a pre-agreed upon period of time, which could be 20 years, 30 years, or anywhere in between. And so that's a design, build, finance model.
So do you become essentially the landlords of that property in an oversimplified way of saying things?
Yeah, we are the landlords of the property, but
Okay.
because we finance our projects in the capital markets, what we do is we actually assign those rights to be of the lessor
Mhm.
to the bond trustee. And so the bond trustee steps in and actually acts as the landlord for the duration of the financing period. So in other words, they collect the payments, they distribute the payments to the bond holders, and we have very, very limited responsibilities during that remainder of that time frame.
Got it. Okay. And then what was the other method? The DBFOM?
Yep. So design, build, finance, operate, and maintain is essentially the same thing I described for the design, build, finance method, except that the operation and maintenance is typically outsourced to a third party facility management or facility maintenance type organization. And so that way the end user, that government partner that we've delivered the project to, they don't have to deal with any of the operation and maintenance of the building. But there's a fee that's built into the project that's paid annually to cover the cost of that service that's being provided by the third party service provider.
Okay. And so talk to me about which communities you're focusing in. Are we talking about, because you mentioned Arkansas, are we talking like urban communities, rural? Where are you guys focusing on these days?
We focus on markets from Illinois all the way down to Florida. So we are right now in about 11 markets. Our focus is underserved communities. That's what we specialize in. And by underserved, I mean communities that have smaller population, less sophisticated construction staff, engineering staff. And so those type of communities tend to need our services more. And so our typical community would have less than 100,000 persons population. But that doesn't mean we won't service a larger community, but that's our primary focus. And so we are in these smaller communities. Like I say, right now we're in 11 markets. Two of those markets are, international, one in the Bahamas and one in the Virgin Islands.
It almost sounds like it's a one-stop shop for underserved communities because, like you said, they may not have the construction capabilities, capital capabilities, but you come in and provide everything soup to nuts. Did I oversimplify what you do?
No, you described it to the T.
Okay.
And the biggest benefit is this: we have an integrated process. So in our integrated process, we have construction managers, we have architects, engineers, everyone that works for us. And so we can influence the cost in a positive manner because we have the integration of all the experts at the beginning of the design process. What happens in smaller communities as well as larger communities, they design a project, they have a budget, but they really don't know what the cost is going to be until they go to the bid market. And then oftentimes those projects come in above budget and they have to then either value engineer, try to raise additional capital, etc., to complete the project. Sometimes the projects never get completed, but they've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on design services. With our process, we control the budget so that we know that we're going to be able to deliver a project within the budget that's allocated by the public partner. And so we do that very well. We call it an integrated project delivery method. And we have all the stakeholders along with all of our experts at the table together from the beginning to the end, from cradle to grave during the process.
And you mentioned your work's focusing Illinois to Florida. What kind of projects are we talking about? And you mentioned morgue, so
Sure.
I'm assuming some public services
Sure.
building. But
No,
what else are you guys
absolutely.
working on?
So we're doing, fire stations, courthouses. We just opened a municipal courthouse yesterday. We're doing educational facilities. In Illinois, we're doing a pre-K facility for a school district there. We are doing a new beachfront restoration project for another city in Illinois. We are doing multiple fire stations. We're doing fire and rescue facilities, police stations, student housing, student union and classroom facilities that's under development for a college. We're doing a lot of solar. In fact, last quarter of 2020, we decided that every project we do would have solar integrated into it. In the Virgin Islands, we're working on student housing, golf course, solar, as well as energy efficiency for the existing facilities on UVI's campus. So we have a variety of project types. All of them are pretty critical to the operations of these public entities and enterprises. And that's what we love to do.
How giddy do you get when you open up? You just mentioned you did an opening and you have firehouses on the way. How cool is it still to have that, that even though it's probably no longer the pomp and circumstance because of the pandemic of what it used to be, but how cool is it now to still be at that opening of a building and be like, wow, this is, if it wasn't for us, this would not be here.
Oh, it's a humbling experience. I mean, you're excited, you're happy because you've delivered another, critical asset to a community, but you're also humbled because you understand that this facility is more than just a building, right? These buildings where people are charged with either saving lives, maintaining the city's, records, maintaining law and order, those sorts of things. So it's a very humbling experience when you realize the type of impact that these facilities are having on communities.
And one of the things that strikes me about your organization is the variety, and you actually use the word variety. About it's like you guys are like a pizza place that sells hamburgers because you're doing beachfront, you're doing firehouses. How are you able to offer such an amazing variety of things? I mean, it's to me it just sounds overwhelming. Like it'd be hard enough for me to figure out how to build a firehouse, but then also you're building a beachfront community. So how do you handle all that?
Well, it's really you have to have a strong team. It's a team effort. And so what we do, we have our national team that's on every project with us. And then whatever project we're taking on that may be a little different, then we hire another firm that's an expert in that area. And we put them to work to make sure that we can deliver the highest quality project. So it's really just about building, the team.
And, Bill Gates coined the phrase, content is king when it comes to any kind of content we consume online or, in real life. But in the world of entrepreneurship, you know this as well as anybody, capital is king. So
That's
talk
right.
to me about capital and gaining capital for these projects. How difficult
Sure.
is it? Who do you work with? Run that down for me.
All of the pre-development costs are carried in-house, so we don't borrow any money to develop projects. So we handle all the architectural design, engineering, design in-house. We are a debt-free company. When we get ready to fund the projects, we typically deliver our projects through a tax-exempt lease purchase agreement. And then we have a bond underwriter and an investment banker, along with a team of lawyers that take our lease purchase agreements and they participate them out to large banks that want to have tax exempt debt on their books. So essentially, we create our own municipal bonds,
Hmm.
and then we sell those bonds to big banks, and those big banks cash us out of the lease agreements.
So you don't have to chase after capital on any of these projects?
No, everything is done in house.
I mean, here's going to be like a really difficult answer to a short question, but how do you do that?
Well, the key is access to the capital markets. Through our investment banking relationship with Municipal Capital Markets Group, we can go to the capital markets and basically sell bonds on a project, and obviously municipal bonds sell because they're government bonds. They have a very, very low default rate. Most municipal bonds never default. The very, very small percentage that do aren't permanent defaults. They're typically short-term interruption in payment. So it's a very secure investment. When we underwrite the project, we know that the project is solid. Municipal capital purchased the bonds initially from us, and then they resell those to large banks.
Wow, that's how did you? I mean, how does one figure that out? I mean, you make it sound so easy, but I'm sure it wasn't easy to get there.
Well, absolutely not. We've been blessed to make some good, strong relationships that have been in place now for a number of years, which have allowed us to grow in the P3 space to be one of the leading companies in the country that deliver projects under a P3 model. But no, it's a very complicated process
Yeah.
that requires typically typical transactions will have maybe 4 or 5 law firms working on the transaction. So there's a lot of work that goes into it, but it's a niche market that require special expertise and obviously access to the capital markets. But what that does for us is give us essentially unlimited access to capital.
Hmm.
And of course, we're not the debt is backed by the credit of the lease, right? And so that municipal partner that's committing to making those annual payments, that's what allows those bonds to sell easily into the market.
Wow. Do you have, I mean, it sounds like you've done so much with your P3 group, but is there a bucket list property or project that you're like, I want to do one of these? Do you have one of those?
One of the things that I've wanted to really do for a long time is to develop internationally, in the Caribbean islands, projects that had significant solar integrated into the project so that we could offset the cost of utilities as part of this process. And so we have a project that we feel like is coming up that's going to allow us to do that. I think that there's a very big opportunity in the Caribbean to integrate solar into the grid because, obviously, because of the reliance on fossil fuel and the importation of fossil fuel, utility rates are extremely high. In the Virgin Islands, they're paying 46 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity. So we can offset the cost significantly, saving them a lot of money and using those savings to deliver other critical infrastructure and facilities to the public partner. And so that's one of the things that's on my bucket list is to do that. So I think we will get there this year.
Yeah, just chatting with you for about 30 minutes, Dee, I have no doubt that you'll probably, I can imagine like next time we talk, oh yeah, we already put those solar panels up. We're good to go. They're already done. But his name is Dee Brown. He's the president and chief executive officer of the P3 Group. Dee, thank you very much for the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate you. That's it for this episode of The Sky's the Limit. If you enjoy the show, make sure that you take a second to subscribe so that you get my new shows when they drop. Also, if you have a minute, I would love for you to leave a review so more people like yourself can discover the show. I'll see you next time.
This has been The Sky's the Limit with Dee Brown. To find out more about Dee, go to dbrownceo.com. And to connect with the P3 Group, check out thep3groupinc.com. The Sky's the Limit is a production of Forbes Books.